Hey patrons, welcome back to the third part of this tutorial series. In the first and the second part we went through a lot about how to draw skin and how to pick colours for skin tones and all of that. So I'll link them in the description. And in this part we're going to be working on another struggle that a lot of you said that you had, and that was hair. So we're going to be going through the basics of how to draw locks of hair. I'm going to first go through how to draw a lock of hair, you know, how to build up the strokes and stuff like that. So we're just going to be using one colour for that to really kind of get to grips with the technique rather than trying to deal with lots of different colours. So we'll really go through the steps of how to draw hair using one pencil, and then I'm going to take you through 3 other different hair colours, and we're going to be working on different sort of things with the hair, so like a curl, straight hair, a plait, stuff like that. So I'll take you through different hair colours and different styles of hair and show you that no matter what you're drawing, it's still the same steps, no matter what colours you're using and what type of hair you're drawing. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'll also be telling you how to, showing you how to use the X-Acto knife as well. So the first thing that we're going to be doing is going through how to draw this. So it's on my phone. Okay. So we're going to be going through this lock of hair, and I've turned it into grayscale because I'm just going to be using the Warm Grey 6 for this. So this is a dark polychromos grey, and I just want to use one colour so that we don't have to worry about what colours we're going to use. It's really just going to help us to learn how to draw hair in sections, how to build up the details, how to build up the shadows. So you can see here that there's a few different parts to this lock of hair. We've got the main sort of lock sweeping downwards, but we've got this lighter one over the top and a few going over and curling up. So now I'm just going to put this up on this side of the screen so that you can see it whilst I'm drawing it out. And I'm going to go ahead and lightly sketch this out using my pencil. And what's great about practicing drawing locks of hair is that you don't have to get it 100% to the reference. So I'm just going to kind of go with the general gist of the hair, but I'm not going to be getting it in 100% accurately. And I have got tutorials about how I get an accurate sketch, so if you want to check them out. But I'm just going to do this very quickly. I'm also doing it a little bit darker just so that you guys can see what I'm actually doing, otherwise you wouldn't see much. So get that one sweeping up there. So you can see that the lock here, it extends and continues below this other lock, and we're just drawing in the basic sections of the hair. We're not drawing in all of the details at the moment. There we go. So we've got the main gist of the hair down now. So now what I want to do is I'm going to take this pencil, and the first thing we're going to start by doing is just start to build up a light layer of hair texture throughout this whole section of hair. Just going to... I was just moving my camera a bit. So let's go throughout this and look at the reference, which I'll keep up on the side of the screen for you guys. And we're just going to be very light with this pencil because we're only using one pencil. We really do need to preserve it, not go in too dark straight away. And look at the reference. You can see that there's highlights either side and it's a bit more shadowed right in the middle. So I'm going to bear that in mind as I do my strokes, that we want to keep it lighter on either corner here and over here, and then allow it, we'll be building up more layers in the centre. I might put this into a pencil extender so that we have more reach. And if you watch the skin tutorials, you'll see that I did that a lot. So you don't have to do this step with grey pencils. You can do whatever colour you want. I'd pick quite a dark colour so that you can get in those darker shadows when you need to. Remember, we're starting off nice and light. And as you can see, I'm doing lines that are going with the direction the hair's going in. And I'm looking at it lock at a time, because each lock of hair, each section of the hair, might be going in a different direction. So just cover this whole area in a very light layer of hair texture. Okay, moving on. I'm going to repeat this process throughout the entire load of hair. You can see that I'm curving it up with the hair, and the shadow on this section is more towards the right hand side of it, and over on the left there's a little bit of highlight. So even though we're adding this all over the hair, it's still important to know where the lights and darks within each section of hair is. Okay, that continues a bit further over to the right. You can see how the pencil extender just gives me a little bit more reach so that we can do those long strokes that we need to. Let's go a bit further down here. And it's very dark where I'm applying the pencil strokes right now in the reference. So that's why I'm just going in straight away a little bit darker, because I know they're going to be a bit darker anyway. But I'm still not making them as dark as they need to be yet. Make sure your pencils are still nice and sharp. If it's getting a bit blunt, then just sharpen it again and carry on. You can add a little more pressure just to sort of get in the gist of where the shadows are. Now moving on to this section. Keep it nice and light. So you can see how with each section it really does change in direction. So just working on the final section. Don't worry if it's looking a little bit, you know, light or messy at the moment. It will come together once we start to build up more and more layers. Okay, so now I'm going to return back up here and start to add more shadows. So we said that the darkest shadows were right in the middle of this lock of hair. And there's a little bit of shadow here. Adding even more pressure to get those few darkest shadows in. Adding a bit more shadow to this section of hair now. By the way, I also did this section quite big, so if you want to do it smaller, then do it smaller. So just keep working your way around the hair and simply just keep building up more and more shadows. Within this section, you can see the darkest area is right here in that reference. Then we've got a slightly more subtle shadow next to it. You do want to get a good contrast in your work. So you can see how already just doing this second layer has really helped to make the hair look more realistic. And we've not even been working on this lock of hair that long. So we've got some shadows right down here. And it tends to be that if you have hair overlapping another lock of hair, then it will create a cast shadow where it's overlapping onto. Adding even more pressure to really darken it up. Okay, so now you can see that this area here is the darkest probably in the whole hair study. So I really do want to add more shadow here. And right at the bottom of this lock of hair. I'm going to go back up here because I feel like I didn't go quite as dark as I need to up here. Like I said, I do want to keep this tutorial as simple as possible, so I hope I'm doing that. I worry whether I'm being simple enough or too simple. I don't know. I'm going to try and be as simple as possible and do as few steps as possible with this tutorial. That's definitely looking a lot more realistic now. I'm going to go through each section and I want to add even more shadows than it has on the reference. I like to go in and add a bit more shadow, add a bit more contrast. I like to do that. So I'm going to go and darken up the shadows even more. Really make it pop. Press as hard as I can on the pencil, particularly in this middle section. Really create that shadow it's got going on. You can see I'm always using lines, and that's what's going to give you a hair texture, using lines. So I know with everything else normally you go in circular motions, but when you're doing hair or fur, lines is the best sort of strokes to use, because it's going to help you create that hair texture as well. Okay, down here, really press hard. There's a little shadow right on the other side, right on the right hand side. I think the look of this almost looks like graphite. And if you were using graphite or any other sort of pencil, I'd do it in the same way. So this isn't just a technique for coloured pencil. You can use this for graphite as well. Just add a few more dark shadows, really pressing hard now. If you ever feel like you've gone in a bit too hard in certain areas, then you can always erase it. Coloured pencil does erase pretty well unless you use solvent with it. So it should erase very well. Okay, so now what I want to do is, actually, do I want to do anything? I think I want to show you how you can erase, even though I haven't really got that much that I want to erase. So I'm just going to get my Tombow Mono Eraser, if I can find it. I think it's up here actually. I'm just going to show you guys how you can create some highlights. So this is what I use. This is my Tombow Mono Eraser. As you can see, the end is pretty dirty at the moment. So I am just going to go in and cut the end off using my X-Acto knife. And so I'm going to show you how you can use this not only to lighten up, for example, if you do an area too dark, but also how you can add highlights. So you can see that that just brightened that area up a bit. And because it is coloured pencil, it is a bit trickier to erase than normal graphite, but you can see that you can add little flyaway hairs. They show it really nicely. For example, if you look at the reference, you can see we have some lighter hairs going over this section, which erase really easily with this eraser. You can brighten up little sections, but always follow the direction the hair is going in still. That's really important. Add some little details. As you can see, I like to add flyaway hairs. I always like to wipe away any bits with my brush, just fluffy brush. And I am going to go back in with my pencil, the warm grey 6, and if there's any areas that I feel need to be gone over, if I feel like it's too dark and then suddenly white, I want to tie those areas in together, just add a bit of shading. And now another thing that I want to do is add in little flyaway hairs. So to do that, I'm going to sharpen my pencil so that it's nice and sharp to get the little detailed hairs. So I'll be right back. I'll just mute you guys a sec. So I've sharpened my pencil, and I just like to go around the outside of these locks of hairs and just add in a few little loose ones. And this is what I find really makes it look realistic. And I find that when I do my critiques, this is something that a lot of people forget, is that the hair is not uniform. There is going to be a few little hairs, you know, around it, a few little messy hairs. It's not all going to be uniformed. So make sure you go and add those in. They're still going to be going with the general direction of the hair. You might have a few that go against that direction. But you can see that the majority of them I'm doing with the hair's direction, the natural direction of the hair. There we go. You can then erase some of them if you want some really subtle ones to create a variety, which is what I like to do. Just adding a few little shadows again. I'm going to add a few little highlights through this section, just lighten it up a bit. And you can add some flyaway hairs, like I said, using this. You can see how easily it erases everything to give you some nice natural looking flyaway hairs. And the last thing that I like to do with these Polychromos pencils is I find that they blend a little bit if you use your finger, which I don't find many other brands do. So I'm just going to soften everything out a little bit just by using my finger to blend. As well as using the eraser, you can also use an X-Acto knife, which I like to use to create flyaway hairs and highlights. Now, it won't work too great with this because we haven't got lots of layers down, but you can use it still to create little flyaway hairs. I'm sorry about the sound, it's not the best sound ever. But you can see over these darker areas particularly that it does lift off the top layer of coloured pencil. And so if you want to get more detailed flyaway hairs that it's harder to get with the Tombow Mono eraser, then you can use the X-Acto knife. So I will show you this later on. It works so much better with Prismacolors and when you have lots of layers of coloured pencil down. So now let's move on to doing another hair colour. We're going to be mixing different colours together now. I'm still going to keep it relatively minimal. We're just going to be having 2-3 colours maximum to actually create these locks of hair. So now let's move on to our next one. So the next colour that I'm going to do is going to be a very caramel brown tone, so golden brown. And I'm just going to be using 3 colours for this. I'm going to be using beige, chocolate and dark sepia, and they are all Prismacolor pencils. So I'm just preparing my chocolate pencil in my pencil extender. There you go. So this is the chocolate pencil. We've also got beige and dark sepia. So those are the 3 that we're going to be using. And for this, we're going to be drawing a lock of curly hair. So we're going to be going for this middle lock here. And again, I just got this image, you know, off Google. So we're just going to be doing this middle one here, and I'm going to start off by sketching it out with my brown pencil. So again, I'll put the reference this time over here so that you can see it. Now let's go and sketch this out. I am going to do this much smaller because I do want to get 3 in along here. So I do want to go a bit smaller. So let's start here. It's quite a big curl. So it goes down. Once again, I'm not trying to be perfect with this. I find that hair with portraits is the one thing that you don't have to be super perfect about. It's not going to really detract from the likeness of the person if you do something a little bit off with the hair. So as you can see, just blocking in the basic shapes. Curve that round. I'm just going to end it there. I'm going to end it a bit further up actually because I think we're going off camera a bit there. So I'm just going to erase it with my Tombow Mono Eraser. It's not going to get rid of all of it, but it'll get rid of the majority. We're going to do a pretty abrupt end to this curl. Yeah, that's still on camera, which is good. There we go, and I'm gonna, because we made that shorter, I need to shorten up this part. So bring that a bit tighter in. So there is our curl. I do want to bring that bit out further. So now we've got in the basic shape of the curl. The first thing that I want to do is erase this as much as possible. We'll still be able to see it because it'll never erase it perfectly. But because you're drawing realistic hair, you don't want any outlines really to show through. So I like to just go over the whole thing and just lighten it as much as possible. Okay. That will do. Now let's go in with our brush and just sweep away all the bits. Okay, so the first colour that I'm going to use is the beige, and this is the base colour. So just like before, we want to work on this in layers, and we're going to start off with the lightest colour. So I want to do very light caramel golden brown. So you can see that I'm sweeping this colour with the direction of the hair with each section. I'm doing it section at a time and just getting in those lines. I'm keeping it a bit lighter in the middle to add a bit of a natural shine, and I'm not pressing hard because it's not like I want this pencil to get as dark as the hair needs to be. We've got the chocolate and the sepia for that. This colour is just about adding a base highlighted tone. There we go, just like that. Now let's go in with the chocolate, which is going to be the colour we're mainly using, and we're going to start to build up the shadows. So we've got, it's like a kind of balayage. I don't have a clue if I'm saying that right, but so there's like streaks of more of a blondish tone. So I'm going to try and create that. As you can see, it's a bit lighter up here. Sweep that down. You can see that I'm being very quick and fluid with my motions. And you can see that I'm stopping at slightly different points to give a really natural look. I'm not stopping at the same point each time. I'm stopping at slightly different points to help give a natural highlight in the center. So I'm going to continue to do this for each section of the hair. We will be going back through to create more of the shadows like we did with the last hair study. But for now we're just kind of getting in the basics. So now that I've got a base layer down with the chocolate, I'm going to go in and create even more shadows, just like we did before. Just going in with a little bit more pressure, and you can see that on the left hand side is where the majority of the shadow is for this curl. So I'm just going to look and identify where the shadows are. You can see that there's also a little gap between the two curls. It's kind of separated a bit, which has created a little shadow right between the two curls. So I'm going to add some more pressure to get that in. And remember, we have got a darker colour if we need to add even more shadow. And we're not trying to copy the colour of the reference image, because that's pretty much blonde hair. We're trying to do brown hair. We were just using that to look at where the midtones are, the shadows and the highlights. So to basically get in the structure of the curl and also get him and kind of understand where the highlights, shadows and midtones are within that curl. Okay. We can go over with a little bit of beige as well to fill in the highlights even more, so they don't look so white. There we go, that's better. And I'm going to continue further down. There's not too much shadow down here. I'm trying to imagine if the hair was brown though, because when it's so light, which it is at the bottom, there's not going to be much shadow. But I'm trying to pick out where the darkest bits are and then darken them up. So if you start to look at it section at a time, curl at a time, if you're drawing a whole hairstyle, then it will start to become easier. It can be very overwhelming when you've got a whole head of hair to draw. And I think that's what makes people rush through it and get, you know, bad results. But I don't think hair is actually that difficult to draw. Maybe a lot of you hate me for saying that, but I don't know. I don't think it's that difficult. It just takes practice. And if you break it down and focus on it section at a time, I think it does become easier that way. So there's going to be a bit of a cast shadow from this lock of hair to this little section below it. And I'm going to add some of the beige down here. I've left a few little highlights. It is currently Halloween, so I can hear all the kids outside. So if you can hear that, that's why. Okay, so now I'm going to press even more on the darkest shadows, just to add in a bit more shadow. So I'm going to go throughout the whole of the hair and just do this just like we did before. And I am going to mute you whilst I do this because it's very loud and I'm sure you don't want to listen to that, and because I'm just going to be doing the exact same process. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to use the dark sepia to just add the few darker shadows within this hair. So like I said, the shadows are mainly over on this side. So I just want to go in, just darken up a few of these areas, give it a nice contrast. Remember, we're imagining it if it was dark brown. There we go. And we do need to add all of the flyaway hairs as well once we've done this. Okay, now let's go in with the chocolate. I'm just going to go over some of the dark sepia just to blend it in with the hair colour. Go back in with the dark sepia. Like I said, I want to keep this simple, so I'm not going to mess about with it too much. I'm just going to add a bit more of the beige though, just to tone everything in together. Okay, so now I want to go in with my chocolate pencil and I'm going to start to add in flyaway hairs. So I'm going around the curl. And one common mistake that I see people make when they're trying to do flyaway hairs is they do them really short. But remember, you want to do it the length of the actual hair. Because they're still hairs, they're just loose ones that are a bit messy. But I see a lot of people do them really short, but that doesn't really look realistic. You can have the hairs going over the main hairstyle if you want. Now I'm just going to go in with the X-Acto knife, as you can see, and just create some highlights, and it will start to show up better on this because it's darker. And you can see how we can get these little details within each section and get flyaway hairs that just lift all of the colour to reveal some really nice highlighted hairs. And you want to not go overboard, and remember, you're not cutting into the paper, so I'm not cutting in at all. I'm simply like scraping my knife over the top. It's barely touching the paper. You don't really want it to touch the paper too much because you just want it to lift up the coloured pencil, not interfere with the paper at all. You could also use the eraser like we did before. But this helps to get really detailed highlights. Okay. Like I said, you don't want to add too many, otherwise it'll start to look a bit fake and too much. And one thing that I do want to do is with the flyaway hairs, you want to add different thicknesses. So for example, I'm going to add a little bit of a flyaway hair that's just a little bit thicker. So just add a few that's just a little bit thicker, as you can see. Just so it's not so uniformed and there's only like the loose hairs. You want some slightly thicker ones and thinner ones, lighter, darker flyaway hairs. Create a variety. So that is it for this one. Now let's move on to our third section of hair. Now that we've done the first two hair studies, what I want to do now is go in and do a bit more of a wacky colour. So we're going to do purple hair to really show you that no matter what colour hair you're doing, the techniques are still the same. And what I'm going to do now is a plait. So I'll whack that up here so that you can see the reference as well. And of course I need to start out by sketching it out. And because this is a bit more of a complicated image, I'm going to switch over to using a graphite pencil so that if I do need to make any adjustments, I can erase it a lot easier than if I used a purple coloured pencil, because there's a lot more sections to it and details. So let's go in, and I'm going to just do it along the side of this lighter brown, warm brown hair study. So I'm just going to do it right here. I want to still leave space for our last one. So I'm not going to do it, too big. And I'm just going to go ahead and start to sketch in all the different sections. And I want the little tail at the end. So I kind of want it to finish in line with these. So I might actually start at the bottom. I have a habit of when I'm freehanding of drawing things too big. So I want it to end here. As always, you don't have to be too specific with this. Like, you don't have to make it exactly the same as the actual reference, is what I mean. So now I'm just going to look at each section, just start to shade it in. Like I said, this isn't a tutorial on how to draw an accurate sketch, but if you do want to learn how I freehand, and I have got sketching tutorials that will help you guys out with that. But really I'm just breaking it down into sections. For example, when I'm doing this section of the plait, I'm looking to see where it hits this little section that I just did. For example, I think that's too big, so I'm going to make that a bit smaller. Otherwise I don't think I'll fit all of these on. But we can go and adjust and tweak things as we go. And look at the size of the next section you're doing compared to the other sections below it. So this goes out a little bit further. Then we've got this section which goes out even further and is a bit bigger. I just want to get in a decent amount of sections. I might not be able to get it all in, but I can try. And this side juts out a bit further as well. And having it a bit more asymmetrical, so it's not like perfect each side, will make it look even more natural. So again, see where it connects to this section here. And you can see it also is connecting with this part. So imagine this hair is continuing through. And you can see this one, it continues up through here. So that's how you can help to match it up and make it look nice and accurate as well. think I'm going to stop it up here. So I want it to stop just in line with this one up here. There we go, that will do. Just erase this bit. And now I just want to clean up the bottom a bit more. So thin it out a bit and make it swoop a bit further out. Add a little band on here. That will do. And now, because we don't want that sketch to be so dark, I need to go back in with the kneaded eraser and just tap over it to lighten the whole thing up a bit more. Once again, I am just going to be using 3 colours for this, which I'll show you in a second. Don't want to get rid of the sketch too much. So I'm just sweeping over it nice and lightly. Let me know if you want to see more tutorials where I actually do go through how I sketch out the sections of hair, if you did find that useful. Or if you'd like to see a proper tutorial, because I wasn't really given a tutorial on sketching out the plait. I was given a few little tips, but you know, if you like that kind of thing, then I can do that as well. Okay, so that's pretty light now. The colours we're going to be using are these 3 here. So we're going to be using the, where is the name? Rosy Beige, the Red Violet and the Black Grape. These 2 are Prismacolors. This is a Polychromos, but any dark purple, a lighter, this is like a pinky purple, very muted tone, and a very dark purple. So this is Black Grape, it's like a bluey purple. That will do. And like I said, these work with any colours, so you don't even have to do purple for this one. If you want to do a pink plait, a green plait, an orange plait, a red plait, you know, black plait, anything you want to do, it will work. So I'm going to start off with our Rosy Beige, and we're going to take this and repeat the exact same process as all of the others, and just start to lay this down throughout the plait. And I'm just looking at each segment at a time and looking at the direction of the hair. It's feathering up towards the middle. And because this is our lightest tone, this is going over the highlights as well. But it is a bit darker right on the edge. But as you can still see, I'm still bringing it into the middle. And I'm just doing that, and I'm just going to repeat that throughout each section. But you can see that now with this one, it's going in a slightly different direction. So I'm changing the direction that I'm doing the pencil strokes at. Just end it there. You can apply a bit more pressure for the darker areas just to help, you know, create more of a structure so that we can see the darker areas compared to other segments. So for example, this section is much darker than this one up here, so I'm just going to apply a bit more pressure. It's quite a bit darker throughout, so I'm just going to apply more pressure as I lay this down, but still be a bit lighter in the middle to create the look of highlights. You can see that it's not really that many steps. I'm doing the same thing each time, But you can see how quickly it starts to look really nice and realistic. I am going to add a bit more shadow in the center of this section. And I want to go back and actually darken up this one as well. Okay, so now let's move on to this large section, and again this is quite dark. So I am using the tones with the hair because I know we're not drawing blondie brown hair, but I do want to use the highlights as well in the hair to help me. So this one's quite dark. There's a bit of highlight right on the right hand side of this segment, so I'm going to create a bit more of a highlight there by not using as much pressure. But just do nice pencil strokes that go in the right direction. And then going from the other side, so I went from one side and now I'm going to go from the opposite end because it is more highlighted in the center. And I find that it helps with the realism if you do add like some darker streaks going all the way through, and don't make it so uniformed. Add some you know, different streaks going through the plait. Okay, remember this is only our first sort of layer of colour. Repeating the process for this section, and it is just the same process over and over again. Nothing really changing. Add a bit more shadow right at this end because you're getting a bit of a cast shadow from this lock of the plait above. It's creating a bit of a shadow on this section of the plait. So bear those rules in mind as you build up the colour. I hope you guys are liking how yours is turning out. And I think if you do something like this, you really do get warmed up by the third or even the fourth. It might take you a little bit longer, but you will start to warm up and it will start to become easier. If, for example, you did quite a few of these and just followed this tutorial, but even with like 10 of these, I know that sounds like a lot, but if you just spent, you know, a whole week, for example, just working on hair, whenever you have a free hour, you know, in the evening, and you just get your sketchbook and maybe work on one section of hair a day, you know, one study, and you can do 7, then you might start to really get into the swing of it. For example, these will probably take me like, you know, 25 to 30 minutes each, which isn't that long. This one's probably going to take longer because there's a lot more detail to it, so I have to work in more sections. But the others didn't take that long. And like I said, this technique does work with graphite as well. So you could even practice this technique with your other mediums that you use. Even something like watercolour, the techniques for that aren't too different from this. I still use the same sort of method. There's just a lot of waiting time, waiting for it to dry in between. I'm going to go back to this section, add a few more shadows. So add the base tone, then go in and add any shadows with this. We do need to darken up the shadows even more in a minute. Then we've just got this tiny little piece down here. Okay, now we've got to do this big section down here, so bigger strokes. So at the moment it's like a very pastel pink colour. Okay, add some of the shadows within this little end of the plait. So now I'm happy with that as our base tone. I want to now go in with the red violet and start to deepen up the shadows. And because we've kind of already got in the shadows, we just need to go over them a bit more. So this is a Polychromos pencil, but you can use like a purple Prismacolor. I'm adding a few little shadows going all the way through the section. I'm not really looking at the reference too much for this, so I'm not really going off the reference. Now that I've kind of blocked in where the shadows are. Might look at it occasionally if I want to see where a coarse shadow is, but not too much at this stage. So this section is a lot darker. So I want to add more of this to this area than the area above it because it is darker. I do find that the Polychromos pencils stay a lot sharper for longer, which makes them really nice for doing detail work like this with, because they just stay so nice and smooth. Moving on to this section, quickly looking at the reference, and we can see that it's a lot darker on the left hand side, all the way down. Okay, we can come and darken it up even more in a bit. I just want to go throughout all of the sections and just deepen them up a bit first. can leave some lighter streaks going all the way through to add that sort of highlight look to the hair. Like you've got some highlights in there. So there's not really much else to say for this particular step, because as you can see, I am just going throughout all of the hair. I want to go from this other side. It's important to look at all of the edges where the sections of hair meets, and I'll do that more in a minute. Just want to shade some shadow just below that section. I just want to go up and add a few more shadows in there. Okay, going a bit further down now. So already I know that I want to go in with my Tombow Mono Eraser and just create a few highlights, because I don't like how dark it's got in some areas. How we've lost some of that base colour. So I just want to bring some of them back. Okay, now that we've done each section, I just want to look through each section a little closer and just see whether I need to add more shadow. Like if there's any cast shadows. But you want to try and avoid outlining the plaits. Okay, now I want to go back in with that eraser. Just use that to add a bit of shine. Now I want to go in with our darkest colour, which is the black grape, and I'm using this now for the darker shadows, just to make it pop a bit more. And I'm just going to look at each section at a time and just use this for those darkest areas. So you can go over it with the red violet if you want to tone it in more with the colour of the hair. So there's quite a bit of shadow right on the bottom of this section. Remember, you can keep going over it with your red violet. Going over with the red violet. Also, if you do find the colours too distracting on the reference, then you can always convert it to black and white so that you can just see the values. I've just done that and it does make it easier. So you could do that at the start. Once you have picked your reference, if you want to use a different colour, then you can just convert the reference into black and white. It does help you to judge your values a lot better as well. For example, because it's blonde and brown, it's harder to know where the shadows are. But if you just convert into black and white, it's easy to tell the darkest areas from the lighter ones. So I'm just adding shadow. It tends to be darker where the sections of the plait meet. So I am going in a lot heavier now to get in all of those shadows and working my way down the plait, not being scared to go nice and dark. And as you can see, adding some more shadow really does help to make the plait pop. Makes it look more realistic when you do have some shadows as well. Okay, now for the bottom of the plait, lots of shadows in this area. I'm going to go back in with the pinky beige and just use that to help blend out each section and get rid of all of the white areas to help make it more of a uniformed colour throughout and just to blend everything out a bit more. Okay, so we've blended that out now. It's looking nicer. Now I'm going to go in with my red violet and start to add some flyaway hairs over the top of the plait, but also around each section. To help break it up. And around the bottom here. Just want to make it nice and messy. I love how it makes it look. You can go in with the black grape and do the same thing. Like I said, you can lighten them up as well. And now I'm going to go in with the X-Acto knife and add a few highlights directly onto each section of the plait. So you can use this to lift up some of that coloured pencil to reveal the highlights. Remember, you're just scraping off the coloured pencil. Add some flyaway hairs over the top of the plait. There we go. Once again, wipe away all of the bits. Go in with the Tombow Mono Eraser and just add some thicker highlights to create a bit more shine within each section of hair. Just add in some highlighted streaks. And adding highlights like this does just help to add more contrast to the hair. So for example, if you mess something up there where it doesn't raise and it just kind of smudged, then you can turn that into a loose section of hair. And then it just looks like it's meant to be there. Adding the flyaway hairs over the top with the Tombow Mono Eraser. And you can go back in, wipe away the bits and just clean up the edges with the black grape if you need to. So I'm just looking around the edges of each section of the plait. There we go. That is it for our third section of hair. Now let's move on straight away to our final one. And this is going to be a ginger hair colour, which I'm kind of worried is going to look a bit too similar to this because this is a bit more warm toned than I was thinking. So when I was doing the swatches, it's going to be like this colour. Oh, we're going to do that anyway. Like I said, it doesn't matter. You can do a different colour if you want. But I felt like I've done so many blonde hair tutorials. I've done white hair recently. Have I done any black tutorials? I didn't have a black pencil and I felt like this was very similar to black. So we're going to go and do ginger hair today. And we're going to be using the chocolate colour. We're also going to be using beige. So the same two colours as this one, but we're also going to be using sanguine. And we're going to be doing a nice curly section of hair, like this one. Really, it's going to be too similar, but we're going to be doing more of a ringlet. So I want to do this sort of ringlet here. Hopefully you can see that. Yeah, my brightness is all the way up. This ringlet here, a bit tighter, a bit more detailed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and start to sketch out the shape of our ringlet, and I think I can do this just with the graphite. I would do it with the coloured pencil, but the one I'd use is a bit short, so it's harder to be light with. So I'm going to use this, and I'm just going to actually use the reference kind of as a guideline, but I want to make it a little bit tighter. So I'm going to take it from about here. We're going to go from this part onwards. So this section, I'm going to cut out the top bit. So just want to loosely block this in. It's a bit harder because it's on an angle and I'm trying to avoid the angle as well. So this strand is continuing further down here. And then it's curling round. Actually, I need to bring that up a bit because it's curling round to meet this section. So we'll slim that down a bit, bring that a bit higher up. Kind of freestyling this section as well, just because I want it to be slightly different from that one so it's not too similar. Just realised I haven't really done straight hair, have I? Might do a little thin section. Let's do a thin section of straight hair as well. And hair isn't really that straight. It kind of tapers in and has a little bit of a wave. So we'll just do this little thin section of straight hair next to it. Okay, so the first thing that I want to do is go in with the beige, and we're going to lighten, I'll go over the whole section with that, but the first thing that I want to do is erase the sketch. While still obviously being able to see it a little bit. Okay, so now let's go in and add the beige. Just like before. I think I raised that a bit too much. So I'm just blocking in the main sections first. So I'm looking at the reference a bit to see the direction each section of hair is going in. Okay, and I'm going to work on this other little straight piece of hair that I'm doing at the same time. So I'm just going to erase that sketch. I don't think I can do it now. I hate needed erasers sometimes. We're going to continue on. And so with straight hair, you just need to be a bit straighter. I don't understand why straight hair is more difficult for a lot of people. Maybe it's not. Maybe I've always just thought people find it more difficult. You'll have to excuse the grey lines. You can see that I'm just going down. I'm giving it a little bit of a, curl. I'm not doing straight lines. It's got a natural bit of wave to it. Okay, now let's go in with our sanguine, and I'm going to take this and put it into my pencil extender. And let's go ahead and just bring this throughout the whole of the hair. And we're using an actual reference that is the same colour that we're doing the hair, so that actually makes it a little bit easier. So I'm going to work on these sections first, then do the ones going in the opposite sort of direction. So lines that are always curving with the direction of the hair. Focus on it section at a time. And I know by this point I'm not saying anything new, but that's kind of the point. I really want to show that with hair, it's just the same process over and over again. I really don't change up my technique much at all when I draw hair. Like, it doesn't really matter to me what hairstyle I'm drawing, what colour hair I'm doing. I'll still use this technique. I'm going to add some like looser, lighter sections. So it's like the ringlet is ending in like a few little pieces. I like that. Now let's go in the opposite direction. Because this is a bit more shadowed, we can shade it in a bit darker. Okay, I'm adding lots more pressure. So now I'm pressing a bit harder to get in some of the darker shadows now that we've added a base layer everywhere. Because at the moment this sort of area has just got the darker shadows, which is making it look a little bit crazy at the moment. Add some loose strands of hair. Now I'm going to go in with the chocolate and use that to add some even darker shadows. So this is just for those darkest areas. And it's definitely going to be darker on the other side because this part isn't getting as much light. And this part isn't getting as much light. So now I'm going to go back in with the beige and just use this to blend everything together a bit nicer, to fill in any white gaps. There we go. Going back in with the sanguine just to go over that chocolate colour. Make sure it doesn't just look brown in certain areas where we added quite a lot of it. So I definitely need to darken up this whole section. So I'm going to go back in with the chocolate, shade it over this whole section, then add a few lines, and on this area lay some down, and then again add a few lines, and then just really darken up the sides of the hair just to add a few of those darker shadows. Now I'm taking my Tombow Mono Eraser and I'm adding some key highlights and highlighted streaks into the hair, just like we did before. You can also use this to go over any particular shadows you think were a bit dark or you don't like anymore. Bring some of these highlights further into the shadowed area as well. And you can use them to add these little flyaway hairs. There we go. And you can even go in with your X-Acto knife to add some detail to each section of hair as well. Just add a bit more sanguine. Okay, and now that is it for that section of hair. And I'm quickly just going to do the same thing with this straight piece. So I'm going to put my sanguine back into the pencil extender. And so say the highlight for this section of hair is in the middle. So I'm going to feather it towards the top into the centre and kind of stop as we get to the centre, because we do want to create that natural glossy highlight. And then I'm going to go at the bottom and repeat the process going up and stop at the centre again. You can see that I'm beginning as well from different points to create a natural look at the bottom, so we're not starting all at the same place, otherwise that will look too uniformed. Darken it up a bit more. So add some darker streaks that can go further down as well into the hair. You can still have some loose hairs that go in against the straight hair, because if it's just straight it might look a bit too rigid. So I do, even though it's straight, like to add a few little loose hairs just to help it look more realistic, just to give it a bit more movement to the hair. Okay, so we've got a natural looking highlight in the centre. Now we're going to take that chocolate and just add a few shadows at the top. Just add a few darker streaks to the hair. And coming up from the bottom. And go over them with the sanguine and go through the middle with the beige to tie it all together. Now that looks really nice, really natural. You can go in with your X-Acto knife then and add a few highlights, a few flyaway hairs going over the top. And there we go, that is how you create straight hair. So that is it for this hair tutorial. I really do hope you found it useful and that you've learned something and that you feel more confident with hair and skin after this series. Thank you guys for watching. I'd love to hear your feedback on this series and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye everybody.